So if you ask me, the ACC has a real serious problem. And I've been saying this for the last few years, but there are a couple of things that happened within the last 2 weeks that made me say, okay, I got to make a video to explain this to people. I have to do it. The problem is the ACC coaches, they treat the games within the ACC a certain way, and then they play the games outside of the ACC totally different. Here's the case. So we know that Pat Narduzzi made these crazy comments about the Notre Dame game that was coming up. And he said Notre Dame could score 100 points and it wouldn't bother him as long as he won the next two games, because the next two games were ACC opponents. And when you watched that Pitt team play against that Notre Dame team, Pitt did not look anywhere near what they looked like tonight when they beat Georgia Tech. That team looked totally different. Against Notre Dame, they looked ill prepared. They were leaving receivers wide open. They were getting outmanned by tight ends. They were just not fighting over blocks. You could tell that they just mailed that game in. And this happens consistently with ACC coaches, consistently across the board. It's crazy. Let's talk about what happened with Syracuse. Okay, so Syracuse, I think they were playing against North Carolina, so in conference, and they were deciding between, I think his name was Collins, the last name Collins, he's a transfer from LSU. They're like, do we play him or do we play this other guy who's a walk-on, and he also is a walk-on on the lacrosse team? Which guy do we play? So they said, okay, playing against North Carolina, let's try this walk-on, see what he's got. That walk-on ended up throwing the ball for like 39 total yards for the entire game. He was trash. He was bad. He was overwhelmed. Didn't know what he was doing. Obviously, he's a walk-on. He's probably not going to be the greatest, right? So he plays that entire game. They get beat pretty handedly. And like I said, I think he threw for 39 yards for that entire game. So that happens. Then the next game, they play against Miami. And he ends up putting in an actual quarterback, the guy who transferred from LSU, brought him in and played him. Okay. So Syracuse, they didn't look great, but they didn't look horrible because they had an actual Division I quarterback playing the position. So he looked the part at least. And Syracuse ended up losing that game, as they should, because their team is just not very good. So, again, he's playing against Miami. He takes out the walk-on and he puts in the actual quarterback, someone who has actual experience, Division I football, puts him in and lets him play that whole game against Miami. He looked all right. He didn't look terrible. He looked all right. So let's fast forward to their next game, which is against Notre Dame. What does Fran Brown do with his Syracuse Orange? He puts the walk-on back in for some strange reason. Not only did he put him in, he didn't have him. Typically if you have a team that's just totally overwhelmed, they've got half the amount of talent that their opponent has. Most of the time when you see these kind of teams, what do they do when they've got a brand new quarterback in? Do they sit him? Do they have that quarterback drop back like Joe Montana every play and just try to throw it down the field? No. They said, we're going to try to shrink this game. We're going to do a bunch of handoffs, a couple of trick plays here and there, a bunch of safe stuff just to keep the game as close as possible. Hand the ball off here, hand the ball off there. Every now and again, we'll throw a play action in, give the quarterback one read, and if it's not open, throw it out of bounds, and we'll just punt it away. That's what a team typically does when they're overwhelmed and they know they got a quarterback who has no idea what he's doing. What did Fran Brown do? He had his quarterback dropping back like he was Tom Brady, looking down the field, multiple reads, throwing the ball directly to Notre Dame players time and time and time again. What are you doing? The score was 21-0 before the offense for Notre Dame even took the field. What are you doing? So, obviously, I'm a Miami fan, obviously. So I want Notre Dame to have close games. The last thing I want Notre Dame to do is to beat Syracuse 70-7. Since my Hurricanes beat them 38-10, I want the score to be a little closer. And then I watched how Syracuse played against Miami. They didn't play this style of football. They didn't say, we're going to run 5 wide and we're just going to have these receivers going this way, this receiver going that way, and I want you to pick the best receiver to throw to. And they had an experienced quarterback in the backfield on that game, and they weren't doing that. They played extremely conservative. Let's keep the game as close as possible. That was their game plan against Miami. But against Notre Dame, since it's out of conference, obviously it doesn't matter to these coaches. So what do? Put this guy in there who's a walk-on and has no idea what's going on. And he's just throwing the ball 5 wide, 4 wide, 21-0 before Notre Dame's offense even touched the field. On defense, Syracuse looked like hot garbage. I believe I saw the stat that said Jeremiah Love had 8 carries for 170 plus yards. 8 carries and got 100. He had 8 more carries than I had today. And he got 172 yards rushing. I think that's the numbers that I saw. That's crazy. Like, what is going on? What is going on? It's nonsense. Another thing, I watched Louisville play a few games, and let me say this too. ACC teams, they play one way against ACC schools. They play another way against teams outside of the ACC. But then they play a different way against 3 schools within the ACC. And those schools, Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. So if it doesn't matter who the team is, they're going to bring their A game against one of those 3 schools. So the way that these ACC schools play is they give their worst performance against out of conference. They play pretty well against the typical ACC school, but they look like world beaters against Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. On the same token, Miami, Florida State, and Clemson, those are the 3 ACC schools that actually perform well outside of the conference. No other school performs well outside of the conference. None of them. So those are the only 3 that actually perform well outside of the conference. Okay. So I'm trying to think of what I was even saying. I get a little frustrated talking about this stuff because it's crazy to me how ill prepared and how much these teams act like they just don't care when they play against teams that are not in the conference. It's crazy to me. I watched Louisville play against Miami, and I watched Louisville play multiple games before this. When they played against Miami, it was a totally different. When they played against Miami, they looked totally different than the games they played before Miami and after Miami. Totally different game. Totally different team. Totally. Louisville played against Miami. They had 3 quarterbacks on the field at the exact same time. Louisville did. 3 quarterbacks in the game. Think about how crazy that would look. If you watch a team play and they're a typical drop back team, they drop the, quarterback drop back, doesn't use his legs very often. They're not doing a bunch of read options or anything like that. It's just a prototypical pro style offense. But then when you play them, all of a sudden they come out with 3 quarterbacks on the field at the same time. Like, hold on, what's going on? That is what Louisville did. 3 quarterbacks at the same time. What is that? Again, I watched Pitt play against Notre Dame. Look scared, overwhelmed, calling vanilla plays, just looking scared the entire time. Then I watched this same Pitt school play against Georgia Tech. And the Pitt team that I saw play against Georgia Tech, they looked really good. It didn't look anything like the team I saw play against Notre Dame. What is going on with that? And it's consistent. Just go and look. Virginia Tech, when they play against a team we'll see what Louisville is going to play against Kentucky. Watch how terrible Louisville looks against Kentucky. And I don't mean they're getting outmanned or outmuscled or just playing against a team that's just far more athletic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the type of play calls they do. I'm talking about um, when they play against Georgia Tech, they're making one hand catches and doing all that crazy stuff. But then when they play against Kentucky, they're going to be snapping the ball over the punter's head. They're going to be, the quarterback is going to be dropping snaps. The receivers are going to be dropping wide open catches. Just watch. They're going to have multiple false starts. It's a very consistent thing, and it's a huge problem that the ACC has. I don't know how they figure it out, but somehow they got to figure this thing out because it turns into this cannibalization thing. And the worst part of it is, I believe when I look at these teams, I believe these teams are really good. I think they're really talented. But when you play these teams in the Big 12, you play this team in the SEC, and you play so poorly, it makes the whole conference look trash. It just does. When I see the Hurricanes play and I watch Clemson play, because Clemson always performs. I know that Clemson's just not good right now. But when Clemson is decent, they perform outside of the conference very well. I watch them play against teams like LSU. I watch the Hurricanes play against Florida, and I watch them play against other schools outside of the conference. Notre Dame, they're independent. And I see them play strong there. But then I watch these other teams like Georgia Tech, when they play against something like they just lay down outside of the conference. So let me know y'all's thoughts on this, man. I do believe this is a huge problem for the ACC. I think they just don't get up for the games, and it's pretty obvious to me, especially when you have a coach like Narduzzi telling us point blank, I don't get up for these games, man. I'm only getting focused on these games that's actually in the conference. And then you have a guy like Fran Brown with Syracuse doing what he's doing, where he's just totally mailed it in. What he's doing right now is like, it's like I heard somebody say coaching malpractice. That's what it seems like. He's putting a walk-on out there when he has an actual scholarship quarterback who has played multiple years of college football. And you're going to go at the walk-on who has shown you that he went 4 for 17 one game for 37 yards or 39 yards? Really? And then when you need when a fellow ACC school needs you to perform well against this Notre Dame team, you tried out the walk-on for real? What are we doing? It's crazy. But anyway, that's my thoughts, y'all. Let me know your thoughts on this situation. Am I tripping? Or have y'all noticed this too, where ACC coaches just don't get up for teams outside the ACC? Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks for watching the video. Please do like the video. Subscribe to the channel. That's all I got. Take care. God bless. Peace.